Hello, everybody. My name is Wambui. Welcome to 70 Years and Beyond. One of my younger brothers had a newspaper route for a while, and I was never so honored as when he allowed me to help him on his newspaper route. Now, back in the 1950s and 1960s, when we were growing up, it was common to have your newspaper delivered right to your door on a daily basis. Now, in the town where we lived, Greensboro, North Carolina, we had two newspapers at that time. So one newspaper was delivered early in the morning before school, and the other newspaper was delivered in the afternoon after school. I cherish those memories of the newspapers being delivered to the door, and I'm happy that I was able to live through that period of time because I see that as a period of time that is just etched in history now, because those times are never going to come back when you have a newspaper delivered to your home on a daily basis by somebody just going by delivering to house after house after house. First of all, with the technology that we have today, there is no need to have newspapers delivered on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day, right to your front door. Because with the technology we have today, you don't even have to get out of bed. You can just roll over or pick up a device, and you have the up-to-the-minute news right in the palm of your hand. In those days, TV was still relatively new too. So we weren't trusting the TV for the news as much as we would in decades later. So we trusted, our main source of trust for the news was the daily newspaper. So the person who usually brought the paper by, most of the time they were boys. There were many girls who were newspaper girls, but most of the time, and the common language was newspaper boy. So if you went to your door and you looked around and you didn't see your paper in the morning or even in the afternoon, you're looking at the clock and you're saying, well, where's my paper? I'd like to read my paper, because usually the boys or the people who delivered the paper came at a certain time. And so if you didn't see your paper, it was very common to hear somebody say, have you seen the newspaper boy today? Did the newspaper boy go along already? And so that is how we refer to the person who delivered the newspapers. Now, when I tell you there was joy in helping my brother, I felt, well, there were two things that were more joyful. One of the things that was more joyful was the Christmas I got my big new bicycle, and the Christmas that I got my black bride doll that I'd been wanting. But other than those two times, I never felt the joy that I felt just being out in the open air with my brother. We'd come home from school, put on our play clothes, he'd go get his papers, and then he'd let me help him on the paper route. Now, these paper people had to have skills. For one thing, usually they came around on a bicycle. So you had all these papers folded up in a basket or in a big bag, and now you're on a bike and you have to throw that paper at the house and try to hit it on the porch so that the person can find it. And at the same time, you have to remember which house you're delivering to, because not everybody had paid up their subscription and not everybody wanted a paper. So you're juggling your bike and you're throwing papers, trying to get them on the porch. And at the same time, you have to know which house to skip and which house to, of course, deliver the paper to. The second skill that I was impressed with was the skill of folding the paper, because the papers had to be folded in such a way that you could throw them with a lot of force, but they wouldn't become unfolded. Okay, so you had to fold them in a way that was tight. But at the same time, you had to make sure that when the person receiving the paper opened up their paper, that it was smooth and that it wasn't all wrinkly and looked all balled up, that it was a nice looking, clean looking paper. The second or the third skill was the skill of actually throwing it. So the idea was to get it right in front of the front door. Maybe you could go a little to the left or a little to the right, but you wanted it right in front of the door, ideally, so that when the person looking for their paper opened the door, they could just look down, see their paper, and pick it up right there. Now, that didn't always happen, and that's where I came in. Sometimes it would go in the bushes, sometimes it would land too far out in the yard, and so it became my job to go get the paper and place it on the porch so that the person receiving the paper wouldn't have any complaints about I couldn't find my paper or I had to dig through the bushes to get my paper. Why can't you just put my paper on the porch? And so that was how I assisted my brother. But I tell you, those were some wonderful days, wonderful memories, and I'm just happy that I was there to experience the days in the 1950s and the 1960s that I remember of having the newspapers delivered daily right to our front door.